actually discussing the RPS anti-racism statement that we've released over the last couple of weeks. So I'm joined by a really interesting panel, again, to discuss what this statement means for the profession and for the RPS. So I've been joined by Ade Williams, a superintendent pharmacist. And we've got Paul Bennett, the CEO of RPS, and Naveen Dosanjh, who's an RPS member and pharmacist. So today we kind of wanted to discuss the anti-racism statement, and particularly actually it's quite timely with the Commission report that's come out today to say there's actually no evidence of institutional racism in England. So it's a really interesting topic today. So we are aware, we know that pharmacy is a really diverse profession from a racial perspective, and it is a source of pride. However, we need to do more to celebrate that racial diversity, and we need to ask ourselves as a profession is, do we do everything we can do to make sure there's racial equality? We've heard from a number of pharmacists and pharmacy professionals that they've had varying experiences of racism and discrimination across the profession, and it doesn't always have to be outwardly overt discriminative behaviour. It could be microaggressions or just the feeling of unwelcoming within the profession. But it could also be more systemic and institutionalized. So we know that there's, the overrepresentation of BAME pharmacists with the GPHC fitness to practice, the differential attainment gap for Black pre-registration pharmacists. And so that evidence is all there to show that actually there is something going on. And it does have a negative impact on individuals' career progression and therefore representation and visibility across different levels of pharmacy. So the RPS launched an anti-racism statement, which focused on action to produce lasting change. And today we want to discuss that in more detail about what that means for the RPS, what that means for RPS members and the profession, and why is it important that we've taken this stance, and what's the importance of being anti-racist and allyship, and how we need our professional pharmacy leaders to also be displaying these behaviours and being allies for underrepresented groups. So I would like to ask the panel to each introduce themselves a bit more and discuss their roles and their experiences of working within pharmacy. So I'll start with Paul.
Aman, thank you. And thank you for inviting me to join this live stream today. So I am a pharmacist, been a member of the profession and our professional body throughout my career, having qualified way back in the 80s. So I think I'm coming up to year 35 very, very shortly, if not this year. And I'm really proud to be a pharmacist and a member of our professional body. That's a really interesting question, sort of reflecting back on, have I experienced racism? I'm not sure I have. And I now understand that that's probably more to do with what I would now call white privilege that I've experienced. So certainly not racism. Other biases, I don't really think so. Perhaps as I'm getting older, I'm more sensitive to ageism that's surfacing, but I really honestly, truly can't answer that affirmatively.
Brilliant. Thank you, Paul. Ade?
Hello there. Hi. My name is Ade Williams. I'm a community pharmacist. I also have a bit of a portfolio role working in general practice and also sitting on the board of 2 NHS trusts. Thanks for inviting me to the conversation about this great work. And I think one of the things that I reflect on is that I guess in many ways I can appear to almost help to disparage the notion that people that maybe have minority characteristics in our profession are in any way sort of disadvantaged from progressing there. But I'm also conscious that that may be, and that is implicit in itself, that in my career journey, I haven't maybe followed the routes that other people do. I'm also a Canadian qualified pharmacist, for example, so I spend some time outside of the UK. But I am always conscious that one of the things that the younger pharmacists that I meet, the first thing they tell me is they're always shocked to find that they encounter me doing some of the things that I do, which for me are very common, and for them seems quite exceptional. And I think that in itself speaks a lot. It raises a question for us. And I think what Paul said there is very true, actually, that for many of us in the profession, we do not see, and we're not in any way maybe holding any sort of biases or racial prejudice. But I think what we haven't done for a long time is maybe to have that introspection and think, actually, is there something that's missing? And I think when we've done that, I think what we then are finding is that actually we are also hearing the voices telling us that, well, it's been missing for a long time and it's been painful and it's actually discredited the profession. And actually that's true. And I think this really, for me, is really part of this journey of where the profession is at the moment. And I'm really welcome where we are, but at the same point, I also know that we're not here early and we have a lot of catching up to do.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Ade. And Naveen?
Hi, yes, thanks, Aman, for inviting me to take part in this really interesting discussion that I feel very passionate about. So I'm not 35 years into my pharmacy career as Paul, but I do feel I've had good experiences and slightly negative experiences, both as a pharmacist working on the front line, a pharmacist working in senior management within the institutions that support healthcare within the UK, but also as a carer and as a patient who uses services within the NHS as well. And I would say that over the last 12 months in particular, I can't necessarily say that I've experienced overt racism as such personally, but I can see on reflection that actually there are structures in place that support racism from the perspective of encouraging biases to continue. If we look at, for instance, the way that we are set up, we don't often consider all populations when commissioning and developing services. When thinking about shared decision making for patients, we often don't have within our staff groups cultural competence. So these are the sort of systemic issues that I've reflected on and I can see are visible, but equally within our leadership teams as well. Do we have people in positions of power using that to positively impact change in this area? Both as allies or as diverse groups within leadership as well, that can often offer different perspectives. Is that really what we see within healthcare, within the NHS, within pharmacy? I think those are the reflections that over the last 12 months have prompted me to feel as though, I need to be part of a movement and action that, tries to address these issues.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Naveen. And thank you everyone for sharing, because it is a really good point that we've all had different experiences, but your role, Ade, for example, isn't the exception, and that everyone should be thinking that's an option for them. And Naveen, everyone should be around the table to influence how things are, the services that we provide. So thank you. So I wanted to I've got some questions prepared and I'll ask those, but anyone listening, if you wanted to pop any comments or questions in the chat box, please do, and if we've got time we can cover them. So my first question is to Paul. So what prompted the RPS to release this anti-racism statement now?
That's a really good question. So we know, Aman, that like most organisations, the RPS has its own systemic biases. And for example, our own ethnicity pay gap, I think, reflects this. We published that for the first time last year, having published a gender pay gap from 2018 voluntarily, because we're a small organisation. But we're really committed to bringing about anti-racism within our organisation, and we've gone through a period of what I would say significant reflection. We've heard a lot from the profession. I'm continually learning from every conversation that I'm having, just to understand what people's experiences truly are. And this great piece of work that we've been involved in through our I&D strategy has really stimulated us to want to learn more and more about the challenges, and to proactively challenge and really create some positive change, to make sure that how we work at the RPS is truly fair for everyone, but also examining what it's really like for those who practice our great profession of pharmacy. So in doing that, in listening hard, we've recognised that our profession is really not as good as it should be at embracing diversity. And we recognise as a professional leadership body what our role is in this. And we know that racism is an issue across the whole of society, and we want to change attitudes within our own profession that echo those challenges and those issues. So it's important we play a proactive part in being anti-racist, and want to try and lead the profession by example in this, as we do in many other things. And it's therefore more than I suppose just being passively against racism. The Assembly, our most senior governance body, was really clear that this is about the organisation making a stand and truly being proactively anti-racist. So why now? Why not? I suppose would be my response. With this, that potentially should have been sooner. I'm really pleased we've done it.
Brilliant, thank you, Paul. And then from Ade and Naveen, from your perspective, what does it mean that the RPS has released this anti-racism statement, and the importance of allyship and anti-racism? So Naveen, I'll start with you.
I think it's apt that we're having this conversation today, given the the published report today that clearly is indicating that we have made huge progress in structural and systemic racism, to the extent where perhaps it doesn't exist in the same form. I think, reports like that they feed into a narrative of people who experience racism, or whether it's overt or systemic or microaggressions, whatever it is, that those people are in some form or another playing some sort of victim card. And it's a shame that such a report has been published. I'd be interested to read all pages. But in terms of trying to look towards the positives, the RPS making a statement like this, for me, is a positive for the leadership in pharmacy, because change can't happen until the issues are owned and actively addressed. And sometimes I feel the biggest barrier in fighting systemic or institutional racism is in the institutions accepting that it exists. And so on a positive note, this statement is acknowledging that there is an issue, there is a problem that needs to be tackled. And it's a step in a direction that allows for those uncomfortable discussions and reflections to be had and made. Racism is systemic. It's not just about bad people doing individual acts. There is something here about the collective as well. And though this statement both looks at individual actions that are required, but also from a pharmacy leadership perspective, it's defining what we need to do as a profession to try and tackle this as well. So it is a positive statement. It sends an important message. It is encouraging the elevation of voices, the stance that perhaps reform needs to happen within the system, and supporting people to challenge the structural racism where it exists as well.
Brilliant, thanks Naveen. And Ade?
And I think just really to echo what Naveen's just mentioned there, it is that this particular statement gives us as a profession a moral and actually right standing to be able to not only address what we know about ourselves, but actually what is more prevalent in the societies that we live in. And we mustn't forget that when we talk about racism and we talk about discrimination, we mustn't speak about this as though these are just sort of arbitrary terms that are in a vacuum. These are lived experiences of people, and what it does ultimately is that it robs all of us. And for us as a profession, if we feel that we have anything to offer the communities and societies that we serve and we care for, it's almost implicit that we also acknowledge our own problems. Again, just to echo what Naveen's mentioned there, but also we then address it. And I think many would say that for too long, our profession has been navel-gazing, has dragged its feet to get here, We've tried to build a consensus that would never happen, because you'd never build a consensus around challenging any sort of social injustice. But individuals have always stood up. And I think what we're now saying is that this is not about individuals standing up anymore. This is not about the good people against the bad people. What we are saying is that pharmacy is on the right side. We are going to change things. We are going to be part of that problem. There is also the work that we need to do to acknowledge that for some members, and when we reflect on this, we will look back at some years, generations of people that have been let down because of this inaction. But we are also speaking to our future, and we're giving them, we're making an offer to them and saying, we from now on are going to move very quickly to fix things. So the pace of that action is there. And I think the governance structure, because of the statement, can now rally around this, because we now have a statement. We now want to see a timeline. We now want to see measures that will be there. We also are now going to be able to say to people who do not subscribe to our shared values that you have no place in our profession, because this is who we are. You are not reflective of us. And I think those are key things for us now to all rally around and say the conversation around this is wrong, is over. We know what the right things are, and we're now going to work together to make them happen quickly.
Yeah. No, brilliant. Thank you, Ade. And that it is having that, being comfortable with the uncomfortable and having those conversations and saying, this isn't okay, and you know, join us or not, but it's up to you. But we need to be strong in our values as an organisation and as a profession, and what that we stand for. So no, thank you very much. And so,
Aman, sorry, can I just jump on something that Ade said, because it's really resonating with me, is that it is really difficult sometimes to have conversations around racism. It can be challenging, and we knew at RPS when we went into the discussion about inclusion and diversity, it wasn't going to be comfortable all the time, but that really is very, very low significance when you contrast it with some of the significant hindrances, obstacles that are being put in the place of people, and preventing them from being their true best. And so while it is challenging and it is difficult, I think I've started to talk much more now about, let's put that in context. For goodness sake, there are much bigger, more important issues at stake than how uncomfortable I might feel in having a conversation. And I hope more people can overcome that, their feeling of uncomfortableness, and just get into the discussion, the debate, learn, listen.
Yeah, brilliant. No, thank you, Paul. That's a really good point. And my next question was going to be about, so in terms of the actions that we're taking, so it's actually kind of, we've got a question that's popped up in the chat box, and I think it covers both. Is you know, we know that pharmacy leadership isn't representative of the diversity of the profession, and what more can we do? But so in terms of the RPS, what action are we taking to make sure that its senior representation is reflective? And that goes into one of the questions that I was going to ask Paul, was about what actions are the RPS going to be taking with this anti-racism statement? Is it just warm words, or you know, what are we going to do about it?
There's always a danger, isn't there, when you issue a statement, that it can be seen just to be words. And we were really clear, and Assembly were really clear when we confirmed what we wanted to say in our anti-racist statement, that this was an action-orientated statement. So there are 11 actions or commitments associated with our anti-racist statement, and it's each one of them is equally important. They're all, I think, very strong, but they're all action-orientated. To your particular question there, Aman, about leadership and reflecting diversity, encouraging diversity, and making sure racism has no place in our leadership. I suppose I'd dissect that into two parts. There's the employee structure of the RPS that I'm accountable for, and there's the governance structure of the RPS that our members elect, and we're just in the period, actually, of the National Pharmacy Board elections, which close very soon. And we've been very clear, I hope, that this is about encouraging people from all communities, all sectors, if they feel they can make a contribution, to step forward, that we will strive really hard to put no impediment in the way of anybody seeking the opportunity to step forward and play a part in our elected structure. As far as appointments into the organisation go, then I'm again really clear, and I think we're clear in our action-orientated statement, that we are making changes to try and remove bias wherever it may be. We talk a lot about unconscious bias. We've got to be consciously addressing every opportunity where we think bias may creep in. And the team, our people team in particular, working really hard within the organisation to help us be better, to get better. We're not perfect. We are flawed, like every organisation is flawed, and we'll be working very hard to try and resolve a lot of those issues. But I'd really encourage anybody who's not read it to actually look at the detail of the anti-racist statement, beyond the first few paragraphs that describe why. It goes on to talk about what. And I think I hope, are being really clear, but we'll stay on top of this, and we need to be held to account for it too.
Yeah, no, thank you, Paul. I'd like to ask that question to Ade and Naveen as well. In terms of just wider pharmacy senior leadership teams, how can we address that diversity and make sure that there is that representation across the board? Ade?
I think one of the challenges that we as a profession face is actually that whenever you have any social injustice, you immediately create a vacuum of trust. And we will see that in how members engage with the organization, the way they speak about it, the way they perceive their sense of value there. It's good that the RPS statement also sits very, very, very much aligned to the joint national plan for inclusive pharmacies. But ultimately, what we are having to do is almost to win back trust, to tell people that we value you, that we know that you are part of us, and actually you're not just some sort of adjunct to our journey, but you're a core part of that. Now, it is a journey that needs to happen, and I think for a long period of time, I think we haven't been consciously doing that. And I like what Paul mentioned there about the conscious action that we need to take. So we need to reach out more. We also then need to, and I think one of the key things that I like about the statement was a lot of the active work. I think it mentions, active 3 times. It mentions proactivity. It mentions actions. It's saying that this is going to be a performance-driven agenda. So people will rightly want to know what the measures of that are going to be, what the timeline of that is going to be. And actually, are there any consequences for failure? Because what happens if actually we've put out a lovely statement, and in 3 years' time, we are back again on this, all 4 of us are sitting here, Paul looking younger than he is today, telling us then that actually it just hasn't gone so well and events have overtaken matters. And I think usually around issues around racial injustice, too many times people have used to those lines, So we must make sure that we are the exception. Can we do it? I think we can, because there's an alignment happening. But I also think we must know that it's not going to be easy. And the question then becomes, are we willing, and that's all of us collectively, particularly our leadership, to put their reputation, their relationships on the line to do what is right, even if it looks as though they are going overboard in doing so, because there is a vacuum that needs to be corrected, and there's a deficit of trust that they must start to build back. Then you will see more people feeling included in the journey of the profession. I think sadly at this point in time, there are too many people that actually do not trust the structures that we have to commit themselves to it. And I think that is work that we must acknowledge sadly is the case, but we can certainly correct it.
No, brilliant. Thank you, Ade. Really empowering as well. But yeah, absolutely, we need to address that trust piece. Naveen, do you have any thoughts or reflections?
Yes. So I don't make it a secret that I've not been a RPS member for very long. It is something that I've taken on board relatively recently in terms of trying to drive the change within the system. You have to be part of it as well. And so that trust that Ade was referring to, not feeling as though we go beyond words, is something that I recognise. And this statement, as Paul and Ade have both acknowledged, is very action focused. But something that I'd like to pick up on is the remark, Ade, I think you made, which was around how are we going to hold people to account? How are we going to make sure that this statement and the actions contained within are truly taken forward? No one's immune to biases, and it's the biases that often lead to the racism. So we can't awareness is not enough. We need to slow down, take measured decisions, speak out when we see the biased behaviours in others or racist behaviours in others. And I would say that this applies to all, from an RPS perspective, to encourage others to sort of lead by examples, really. The RPS leadership, the whole of the leadership, the board, the assembly, need to take these actions forward and be visible in this space. And I wonder whether, as a member speaking to the leadership body, the leadership organisation, what would be helpful to see is internal processes that ensure that this is given the platform that is necessary across all leaders within the organisation, so the board, the assembly, and actually maybe have touch points regularly to see what have you done, what action have you taken, what points in this action plan have you really done over the last month or since the last meeting, and keep that dialogue fresh and going, because otherwise it will just become a statement that doesn't move forward or make any change. And only those that are truly passionate about this topic seem to champion it. It needs to be for everyone to see the real change take place.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Naveen. Did you want to add anything, Paul, to what you've heard?
I thought that was really powerful, actually, Naveen. There's something about, as in all walks of life, actually, doing what you mean to do and not just saying what you intend to do. And again, in all walks of life, managing organizations, running businesses, it's the output that matters. It's the change that you make that matters. It's not the intent that you had. I'm really pleased that I've not yet encountered a single point of resistance or negativity to our agenda internally at all. In fact, far from it. It's the opposite. In some ways, having to manage the enthusiasm that there is to step into this space and do something about it, making sure we're managing that within the resources that we've got as an organization, but making meaningful difference and meaningful change. But that will only ever mean something when it's actually changed something. So that's the importance of measure and performance. And like all things in the RPS, we monitor our performance internally very, very closely, very carefully, often not to the level that I'm sure our membership would appreciate or perhaps even want always to see. But in this space, on this issue, it becomes even more important. So we're absolutely committed to reporting on that. And I know, Aman, you have regular dialogue in the meetings of the Action in Belonging, Culture and Diversity, the ABCD group that we host, to listen to what people's reflections are. And I know you hear it very loudly and very clearly if we're not demonstrating change.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and anyone listening, if you're not part of that group, please do join, because that's where we'll get the feedback. But, I think it's clear from the organisation and from the profession that we don't want to be having this conversation in 2 years' time and discussing the same thing again. What we want to do is talk about how we've done what we've done and what more we could do. Ade?
And I think there is an urgency, there as well, because remember that it's not just about the RPS. This is a professional leadership organization. So not only do we need to sort out or address issues within the structure of the organizational structure in there, but we also not only have to change the culture of that, but actually there are parts of our profession that are not necessarily underneath the RPS's remit, that we need the RPS to go and actually bang the doors of change, to say that we demand this on behalf of those that are in our profession, that have contact with you. you know. So in this work, you know, change really is a destination, not a journey. And the journey doesn't even, it's not, you know, the destination is not a great RPS that is representative of the pharmacy profession. It is a pharmacy profession that is representative of everybody in the profession, and gives them an equal opportunity to use their talents, their gifts, and their time to help to endear people to the value of what we are all about. And that is the RPS's remit. So, you know, so I think also doing that means that we don't fall for that trap of, you know, focusing just on our organization, forgetting that actually as a professional leadership organization, we need to lead the change well beyond just the RPS itself. And I think, and that is again a big ask of the RPS, but also actually something I feel that the integrity of the leadership and the caliber of people that should be in the leadership of the RPS should be able to stand up to and help us to fulfill.
Brilliant, thank you, Ade. Any final thoughts or points that anyone wanted to make at the end? No? Oh, Naveen, yeah.
Yeah, just to reiterate the point that actually this statement is meaningful from the RPS, particularly if people within the organisation are held to account, actually truly do demonstrate exemplar behaviour on this and leadership on it. But actually for the members and non-members alike within the pharmacy sector, you know, this is applicable to everybody. We all have biases. We all can take action to improve the situation for everybody. And so although the discussion today has been very much focused on what the RPS should do and could do, you know, I think we should all take time, as Paul has suggested, to read what those actions are and see how we can apply them to our practice as well.
Brilliant. Thank you, Naveen.
Yeah, two quick ones from me. It's a plug for two things because I think they're really important. We very recently published a toolkit on microaggressions. I think it's well worth having a look at that. Our members seeking that out. I learned a lot actually by reading through that. A child of the 70s brought up on TV programs that perhaps are really not appropriate to today, including phrases and so forth that part of my upbringing I'm somewhat ashamed of, and learning how perhaps my language could be better and improved and avoiding microaggressions. I think fantastic toolkit, I have to say. Well done to the team involved in developing that. And the next piece is around a really important next step for us in the work that we're doing, and that's around our workforce inclusion and wellbeing pledge, which is an invitation for those who create working environment, employers, commissioners, to work with us, and those who practice in those environments to work with us and pledge to address some of those obstacles that are in the way and create, as we know, unpleasant working environments for people. There's some good stuff going on out there we need to replicate and amplify, and there's some not good stuff going on out there that we really need to address.
Yeah, no, brilliant. Thank you, Paul. Yes, so the microaggression reference that Naveen also helped to develop, so thank you, is live, and then the workshop recording is going to go out in emails today, and also will be live on the website from today. And then the workforce pledge piece, there's still an opportunity for people to contribute to, and we're running focus groups today and on the 6th of April. So if anyone wanted to add to this conversation, there's still an opportunity to do that as well. So I'd just like to say a final thank you to our panel for a real insightful and open conversation about anti-racism and the statement. So thank you again. And if anyone did have any comments or questions, please do pop them in the chat box or email us at ind@rpharmac.com, and we'll be happy to pick those up for you. So thank you very much.